Welcome to The Lost Signals discusses film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzar-Ramosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a holiday edition of The Lost Signals Reviews TV and Television.
In quotes.
This is the we're celebrating the war of ungrateful colonist rebellion. But today we're doing Extraction, the 2020 film by Russo Brothers and Company.
They wrote it, and Sam Hargrave, I believe, is the director.
Yeah, but I believe he works as a stunt coordinator. He did Atomic Blonde too, which was great.
Yes.
We'll discuss this one. Anyway, I'm Jonathan Ian Menzer, and here our ungrateful columnist number one, Scott Thurlow.
Hoorah!
And ungrateful columnist two, Christopher Morgan.
Revolt.
Yeah. So I'm going to give the funny log line, Man on Fire 2, Ragnarok.
God damn it. I came out with something so close. I was going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe it's not a Tony Scott film.
Before you go on, it's similar to, remember when I referenced Three Kings on The Five Bloods, and you, Chris, were like, I have no idea because I've never seen Three Kings?
Yeah.
Similar situation. I've never seen Man on Fire. But I believe you guys. It is a good reference.
God damn. I'm so glad to hear you. Go on. I'm sorry.
No. Anyway, I'm going to do the plot. This is every movie. This is a certain breed of action film where, like, the John Wicks of the world are more of, I would say, like MMA. This is more of a boxing film. It's a brawler type of action film.
Sure, I get you.
And it follows along the same beats that many of these type of films do. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think this is a well-done brawler, but the idea is a military guy comes in to save a young person who's been kidnapped from a mustache twirling villains. There's a lot of betrayals and conflict along the way, and he ends up saving the day. And that's basically the movie, but the devil's in the details with this thing. So I'm going to save a lot of the political commentary for later, but I think this was, again, not a innovative film by any means, but a well-done version of a film I've seen many times, updated for modern day. So I'm probably going to give it like a 2 for, this is not bad, it's not great, it's just straight up the middle.
I'm going to read you directly from my notes. Plot 2. Pacing is fine. It's a standard template, but well executed. Like, I don't know what to say. Even if it veers into trope town, it uses those tropes well. So, like, yeah, it's nothing mind-blowing. It's not like the most original plot ever. I think, like you said, the details maybe flesh it out a bit as we'll go along later on in later questions. But as a narrative itself, as the story stands, yes, it is perfectly fine, and I'll probably give it a 2 as well.
So knowing nothing about this beforehand, they introduce a character who's his rival. And I'm like, no way they're not teaming up for the final act. And lo and behold, they team up for the final act.
Yes, many events can be, like, if you have seen a film, as you mentioned, like this, it's kind of obvious. You can predict them fairly well. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just that you've seen it before, and they're hitting the same notes, like you said. So, good, Chris.
I'm going to give it a 2. Much like Ian, I kind of predicted most of this. The second I saw him drinking, I'm like, well, his kid's dead. I don't know about his wife. And he's, it is what it is. It's average, so it's going to get an average score from me. It's going to get a flat 2.
Yep,
exactly.
I hear you.
All right, Chris, would you like to continue with the themes of this work?
The themes. The themes are the military-industrial complex sucks a wet one, no matter. To paraphrase from another awful movie, not that this is awful, but Godfather 3, the more they the more you try to get out, the more they pull you back in. And the only reason, when I say he wanted out, was he was definitely a man who is content on drinking himself to death or drowning, one of the two,
or getting killed in an operation. One of his mercenary jobs.
But like the mercenaries are a holdover from the military-industrial complex. I'm glad I got supporting characters because I have a lot more to say about that, and a lot of other stuff I'm going to say is going to probably be put in dialogue as well. But the thing is, again, I'm not going to go belabor certain points, but this movie is what it is. So I'm probably looking at like a 0. It's like a 50-50, but probably a 49.50 if we're talking, levels.
Wait until I go.
All right. Well, I thought you might give it a 1 because it seems to me, Chris, that it's continuing the theme of the PTSD in soldiers. Like we sort of been getting into, like a la the Five Bloods, right? The whole point, like you said, he's been scarred and tarred by the military-industrial complex and now is stuck in the situation. So I think that they addressed that pretty well, even if, yes, he had cliche elements to his character, a la, oh, my son died, et cetera, et cetera. Like, yeah, you expect that in anything like this. And I think that's more character than themes, really, to me. But I think they handled that pretty well. Like, he basically, I think there's a line even in it, I think his partner or his handler, like Nick, she says to him, you're just spinning the barrel every time you take a mission, and sometimes you're hoping for it to hit you. So I think like that does speak to themes, and to me, which is why it was stronger, and I'm leaning towards a 1. So with that, I think Ian's going to expand.
First of all, I don't know if you ever played this, Chris. Scott has. Max Payne 3. This is Max Payne 3, the movie. Literally plot for plot, except it takes place in Brazil and not in Bangladesh. But the idea of redemption is something to die for. And I think that parallels with the idea of this. He's not American, he's Australian, but it's the Western conception of like, we have committed terrible sins with the conquering, and Australia's as guilty as the U.S. is in this, of dividing up Iraq and Afghanistan. And
genocide of indigenous peoples.
It is not too late to do the right thing by saving the next generation. So I think that was a different theme in there. But even more importantly, this is kind of a meta commentary here, is that a lot of these films, that's a tradition in Hollywood as well, of having an actor that is big in their own country. Here it is Saju, played by Randeep Hooda, his rival who becomes his partner, who is a big name in
He's
India.
very well known, it seems, yes.
And it's using a Chris Hemsworth-like character, a white face, to show a talented actor from a foreign country. Very famously, it reminded me of Jet Li, who was huge in China, I believe. I forget the country he comes from, but I apologize for that. But he wasn't making, to make a splash, they brought him over for the villain of the Lethal Weapon 4, I believe. And then he became a star in his own right. And a number of actors of that caliber had to have, in a sense, and if the idea, and this movie has been accused for the white savior role, but I've also heard arguments for the idea that white people, if they actually want to enact good change, is to become, to use their voice to promote the talents of people from other countries. And I think that this brought in many famous actresses. Iranian actress Golshift Farhani.
Apologize about the names,
who played
but she's
Nick.
Very good.
Yeah,
she was also in Jarmusch's movie Patterson with Adam Driver. She was excellent in that too. Yeah.
I've never seen her in that, but yeah, she was great in this. And yeah, like, go on. Highlight other actors.
I apologize for all this. I did look them all up before this, but Rudraksh Jaiswal, who played Ovi, is has been acting since 2013. He played the kid Ovi, who was being saved. He did a phenomenal job. But the idea is that they use, yes, Chris Hemsworth is the white face of this movie, but it's also about bringing in all famous actors from India.
It's more of a showcase for actors who are in a different region who you wouldn't normally be exposed to as a Western audience.
And for better or worse, you wouldn't watch unless Chris Hemsworth was there. So I think that the intent of this movie was to also showcase several of these actors. And I think that's a great thing. Yeah, it might be great if we just appreciate their art for what it is, but so I'm going to give it a strong 1 for that.
Okay, as a internal, because I'm really sensitive to the PTSD, and I'm totally on the side of the soldier, as being used and abused by the military-industrial complex. But that meta comment you gave, Ian, because the performances were phenomenal. I enjoyed the actress who plays Nix very much in Patterson. I enjoyed her. Let's put it this way: any average that the reason I was able to give it what I gave it is because of the performances. I mean, Chris Hemsworth. I mean, like I said, I don't want to pick on this movie because Chris Hemsworth was great. David Harbour was great.
It was okay.
The kid who played Ovi was incredible. He was awesome. Good. He was incredible. Mm-hmm. Nix was great. The adversary turned partner. I mean, the performances are outstanding. So I'll give it a 1 on that because I think again, I agree with you, Ian. I think it brought to the fore some incredible talent that we would not otherwise see because Hollywood likes to see the exact same phases over and over.
And that's why Chris Hemsworth was there.
Yeah. But the ironic thing is, if I probably would have been more inclined to see it if Chris Hemsworth wasn't in it because I am so jaded by the Hollywood. Hey, let's throw on whoever's popular at the time.
On the bright side, I found 2 movies for us to do later off of this work to explore some careers because I'm also a big fan of female Kurdish fighters and Golshef. Yeah, she did a movie based on that. It's actually a big. So I believe "Girls of the Sun." I believe
it's fantastic! But, I look forward to that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, the meta commentary. Yes, I appreciate. I see like how I guess cynically why Hollywood might do this, or at least a Western movie like in such a way. And yes, I think it's in general a positive thing. But I'm just saying, like internally, the narrative. I thought the themes worked, and if it means that we audiences. Some of them, a portion of them, will then look up the works of those who are in it, who are not Chris Hemsworth, and explore them. Then I think, yeah, that's a positive thing too. Yeah. So I'm giving it probably a 1 on either way. I'm just saying, like internally to the story itself, yes, and then the intent behind it as a showcase, if you will, of great actors who might not have gotten the exposure otherwise. And yeah, same thing.
All right, Scott, it's on to you with Antagonist.
So this is an interesting one as well. Maybe Chris will back me up as we always like to do. On the face of it, I'm sorry, I don't even know the character's name. He's the drug lord from Bangladesh. It's basically a clash between 2 drug lords, and one from India, one from Bangladesh. The one from India, Ovid Sr., right? He's in jail, and his son, Ovid Jr., is sort of like trying to live his life, trying to be a normal life, but he knows he's the son of a powerful criminal, essentially, and gets kidnapped by his rival's goons. And that's the whole job that Chris Hemsworth is called in to extract him. So, like, well, on the face of it, I don't know, does anyone have the cast or like character names? Like the gangster from Bangladesh, he's the one who sends his goons, his basically bought off military soldiers.
Well, Saju is his guardian who.
Right, but that's the thing I'm talking about. Sorry, while you look it up, I'll just try to continue on. Like so, like I'm saying, the gangster guy, the drug lord guy, is the face of it, and yeah, he like wavers between 1 and 2 dimensional kind of. He's introduced again in all of the classic like. I'm very low key menacing, right? And I'm going to threaten you, like his introduction scene, and he's got the military on at least on his side, on that side of the country, in his pockets and all that. So that way you can like essentially Max Payne them if you're like he hires literally the entire military to go after them, right? Like pretty much. So like to me, that I wavered between this one because at times he had flashes of more than just the mustache trolling 1-dimensional stuff, but other times he falls back into that. But maybe he's more like the symbol of the endemic, like the drug wars that have always existed, and name any random like country, right? So like that's sort of how I viewed it, how I cut it up. So I'm still not sure how it shakes down. I'm leaning towards a 1, barely, maybe because of the combination of those 2 elements, those 2 factors. But I'm not 100% sold on it. So with that, what do you guys make of the antagonist or ists?
I would have been much more interested in the antagonist if the drug lord had died and that kid that got his finger cut off assumed his position, became
soldier essentially.
Became maniacal because then you do have somebody who's been broken, somebody who has turned his traumatic stress into what would be more complicated, more interesting villain, because in a lot of ways he blames Chris Hemsworth, but I can't get past the superficiality of it. I'm going to give it a 0 because I feel like, in the thing with the villains, I feel like it was a missed opportunity. I don't want to give too much away, but since I'm supporting, I'm going to go ahead and jump the gun a little, because if it weren't for the depth of Ovi, Saju, David Harbour, and eventually Nyx, I was a huge fan of her.
Sure.
I was a fan of the actress from the word jump, but the character I became more and more of a fan of, and her last scene was great. But I think the richness of the supporting characters actually highlighted the fact that, to be honest with you, I completely forgot there was a villain in this half the time. I knew they were being chased. I lost track of who they were being chased by. So I'm going to give it a 0.
I agree. For a slightly different reason, is that I know a lot of Bengali people. My ex-girlfriend is one who's Steven's brother, if you watch this channel regularly. I have a lot of students. I have friends from my work who are Bengali. Patterson has a large population. It's weird because they elevating the Indian culture here at the expense of Bengali culture.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that too, for sure. I thought
and there's actually one of, I think, although I don't agree with the white savior argument from, as I mentioned previously, I do agree with the idea of the demonization of Bangladesh. And I think that it was almost a ridiculous portrayal. And what's funny is this is based on a comic book.
It's too one-dimensional.
Based on South America. And I feel that the idea of government drug trade, and perhaps that's bias on my part, makes a lot more sense when you're looking at certain South American countries than it does necessarily just putting this in Bangladesh. From what I know, Bangladesh really doesn't have a huge corruption problem in the military based on the drug trade there. So I think it was, again, the elevation of India at the expense of Bangladesh and a bunch of kind of 80s action villains.
That's what it is.
In a 2000s cultural relativist world. And it did, especially with the protagonists and supporting characters, as you mentioned, and it didn't really work for me.
I think that might have been so I wrote down 1 here originally for this, but as you guys talked about, I think the last thing you said might have been the thing that pushed me into a 0 now. Because, it's a little flat overall, and it comes off a little uncomfortably because of that. They're just sort of broad brushing these things.
The villains are just throwing kids off of buildings.
Yeah, right.
It's
that's like the 80s thing. You're what? Right? So I think that might have pushed me over. I think I'm going to switch to a 0, even though, again, I was wavering on the outset and maybe sort of default into a 1, but I think I'm going to officially mark it 0, dude.
And if it was the 80s, there'd be blonde-haired East Germans that were throwing the kids off the building.
Sure. Or Russians or something.
Asking, what did Bangladesh do to deserve this?
Do you know what's really funny? I mean, to be quite honest with you, I was just kind of watching. I was kind of half watching the movie because parts of it, when it wasn't doing the character stuff and until the action scene, until the final conflict at the end, it was just there. I didn't realize until I put the subtitles on it that we were talking Hindu and Bengali because, like I said, it wasn't just any kind of a cultural thing. It was just that I think for the first half of the movie didn't really capture my attention to the point, like I said, where I did have to put the subtitles on because I really was having a hard time following this. I kept waiting for Nyx to somehow be a turncoat. I was like, I couldn't tell who was going to be a turncoat and who wasn't. Yeah.
All right, I'm moving on to protagonists here. Chris Hemsworth plays Rake.
Tyler Rake.
Tyler Rake.
It's okay.
Because he cleans shit up. Get it? I thought that was I don't know if there's.
I thought they were more of referring to the bird of prey or whatever. But no. Although they do have a discussion over Rake.
I thought it was. Yeah. I think Obi says like, oh, like a gardening tool.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. No,
Come
they
on
do have
now.
dialogue on that. But Chris Hemsworth's a fine actor. Again, I think this was to highlight a lot of the supporting cast. So he has more of a subdued role here, although he has his emotional moments there. Whether they worked or not,
Almost
I think is
cliche.
more on the script's fault. But
yes.
is he a legitimate action star? Sure.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
enough, I guess. Like,
I might include Saju as a protagonist because they
It's
do
tough.
have a partnership there, especially towards the end. But then I might have to include Nick in there, and that's weird. So it might just be Chris Hemsworth. And he didn't do a bad job. And he elevated a little bit more than the blandness of, I think, the script. So any points I would deduct off of this, I'm going to throw to the dialogue.
Huh.
But overall, I think that he's a fine protagonist for this work. So I might give it a 1.
I guess fine is correct. Like I had 0. Like I switched. Like I had 1 for Antag in my original like my breakdown and 0 for Protag. But like you're right. Like, he is fine. He serves that role like perfectly well, and he's a good actor. Don't get me wrong. You know, not his most amazing role, but I think you're right. Like most of that is probably on the script, not he himself.
Mhm.
Right. So like even though like parts of the character are cliche, are tropey, if you will, it's not necessarily like handled in a bad way. And I could almost see an argument for including Saju as like in the latter half of the film, like this the back half of the film as a protagonist as well. Because yeah, like they do the team up thing, which you could probably see coming, as you said, anyways. But even if it's just Hemsworth, even just Tyler Rake, like I think I will give him just enough, like just over the line for a 1. It's fine enough. It works. There's nothing like it doesn't fall flat in any big time way to completely erase anything else that happened that was set up beforehand. So yeah, I think I'm maybe, unless you have something crazy to say, Chris, I think you convinced me to do it a 1 here. So with that, go ahead, buddy.
I'm actually going to give him a 0, and I'll tell you why. Because I didn't see him so much as of I mean, he was obviously the protagonist. He served that role, but narratively, he was more of a pivot person because, quite frankly, his backstory and who he was not remotely interesting. He was interesting because of the
only because you've seen it. Sorry, Chris. Only because you've seen that so many, like thousands of times. But
yeah, but like watching this kind of stuff for since the 80s, I'm not gonna, it's like a burger. You can go anywhere and get a burger, but getting a really well done burger, this is your average burger. But the reason I'm going to give him a 0 is for this. He is definitely the protagonist, but to me, he was more of a pivot person. He was more of an excuse to get to know the supporting cast. Like he was interesting enough, but the movie gained my attention when the more characters we brought in that he interacted with.
Well, that's why I kind of appreciate taking the white front man and giving him a lessened role to allow these great actors from
without question. And one of the things I have been striving for in these, and it's been recent. Like you've talked me out of something that I'm going to get to later on. But because of that, I'm shifting. I've got to shift some weaknesses around. Okay. And to me, I liked Chris Hemsworth, but I liked his character. And I agree with you, Ian. I am grateful for the fact that he was a pivot person to highlight these other excellent performers. But like from a narrative standpoint, he really just wasn't that engaging of a protagonist.
Fair enough. I agree. Yeah. We're actually two sides of the same coin here.
Soft 1 for me, like to your point, Chris, but still officially 1 to the points you made.
Yeah. All right, Chris, let's talk about this astounding supporting cast.
The supporting cast was phenomenal. The thing that I found the most tragic thing about this film was that, and please understand, I'm not kidding when I say what I'm about to say. The interaction between Avi and Chris Hemsworth was just, the two of them was just amazing. I mean, the two of them just clicked, and I bought his caretaking role. I bought Avi's. Sorry, I keep saying Avi. Ovi's wonder of him, and being able to see through him just like the audience could. But it was more impressive hearing his take on it. But I really wish this were more of a gangster film and less of a militia film. Something like, there was a film called Gloria, where not the remake, but way back, in the 80s, where this woman has to protect this child. I wish it was somewhere between a combination of that with some kind of bizarre adventures in babysitting that took place in a night. It take place in a night, a la After Hours, or a la into Landis's film Into the Night. I think that would have really. I think that was a missed opportunity.
Huda's very famous for those type of films.
What'd you say?
Huda, who played Saju. Saju. He did like Once Upon a Time in Mumbai, and those type of films. He is famous for his kind of gangster kind of roles. So again, we're going to see him do those kind of films, hopefully sometime soon.
But I look forward to it because I said a lot about the supporting characters before. That's why I give the caveat. I got supporting characters, so I'm going to jump the gun on this. But my big wish was that it had been a buddy film from the beginning, but still have all these excellent actors. I mean, Nix could have fit in there. Because it was the beginning action stuff, but it was the middle to end character stuff. The last 2/3 character stuff that really nailed it. I'm going to let you guys continue because I know we talked about a lot of supporting characters already. I just wanted to make a comment, and I just wanted you to understand that I wasn't trying to be funny when I wanted to be some kind of gangster adventures and babysitting that took place in one night. But it is actually a credit to how strong. When this film became smaller, it was a better film.
Yes, I agree.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So I'm going to let you guys talk about it. And I'm going to also say Nix's last scene was amazing.
It was a Bond scene.
It was, but what's his name's in the stall, and she walks up next and stands right next to the stall. It was just it
totally worked. So something you said sort of jarred me. So now that I think about it, she was almost like a Burn, I don't remember the character's name, but in Burn Notice, she's the support character, but then can be a badass because she's trained in what she needs to be.
Oh, I love Burn Notice back in the day.
I love Burn Notice.
It's funny that now that I thought about it, I was
what's your name?
I don't remember, but but it reminded me of that. But yeah, the performances were amazing. And Saju, basically, they spent time with him to set up his character, set up his family life, right? Who he was. He was an ex-Indian Special Forces, so they mentioned that. And yeah, he had his own sort of scheme going on. He's going to hire Chris Hemsworth, the black market merc guy, and then sort of double cross
Fiona.
him. Yeah, Fiona. Sort of double cross
Gabriel Anwar.
Yes. To therefore not to have to pay him and get Ovi back for his boss, Ovi Sr., the drug lord who was in jail. And yeah, you're right, Chris. As you just said, when they focus on those smaller, more intimate moments, the film really started to click, really worked. And yeah, and Nix herself, again, the actress name, it's hard to pronounce, but she did an amazing job. And I like the fact that at first she's sort of subdued, sort of oh, she's in the background. She just sort of is, she's sort of fucking, oh God, in Gross Point Black, she's sort of Cusack's secretary, but no, she actually shows up in gear, right? And is taking people out, actually takes out, and we didn't mention him again. I think Chris, the guy who played the general, who was basically the drug lord's dragon, he's a colonel or general, whatever.
Colonel Sniper.
Of the forces. Yeah, Colonel Sniper, if you will.
Sniper.
Was he not the actor from The Expanse, or no? He looked just like him. Maybe I'm just being vaguely racist. I don't know. I hope not. He reminded me of that guy, and he's the same. I think it's him.
I know you're talking about, but I'll look him up while Ian's.
He's essentially a secondary character. Really, again, like I said, he's a dragon. He's there for a couple of scenes, but you get from what those small moments, you understand basically who he is and what his position is as well. I would say. So yeah, I think that all worked. It all worked really, really well. Like you said, given that it's the showcase via Hemsworth to show off these actors that American/Western audiences might not have otherwise been exposed to. Yeah, I think it worked, and I think it worked very well in the narrative story itself, as these little side characters sort of slid into place, and then Saju, even though if obviously teams up with Hemsworth, that still worked. I like their chemistry when they did do that. Like their chemistry when they were fighting. Like their chemistry when they decided to team up. And to save Ovi, to get him out of there. So yeah, it all worked. Very strong one for me. One of the strongest points of the film.
Without question.
I think that the director, I forget his name, apologize about that. Yeah, he handles women very well in his action films. Atomic Blonde, I think, is fantastic.
I agree. I loved Atomic Blonde.
Nick is a different type of female action hero, but
So the broadish umbrella kind
yeah,
of.
but
that.
she's a badass. In fact, she's probably the most badass out of all of them.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, as I said, more of a spy type character than an action hero necessarily. But Ovi is interesting. One is that he his IMDb page, his biography is fantastic. I looked that up. It sounds like a high schooler wrote it for college.
I'm pretty sure he wrote it himself while in high school.
But I like to think of him as a representation of the transition in India, because a lot of these types of films take place in developing nations. Where Max Payne 3 was in Brazil, Manfire, I believe, was in Mexico or another South American nation. Or not another, some kind of a
Similar location.
But the idea of developing nations, and I think that Ovi represents that transition from a more authoritarian thing to he's kind of a nerdy kid who is, and I think again, he did his job perfectly. So yeah, I'm going to give it a strong one.
Yeah, I agree.
Actually, I think perhaps the strongest one I have to give for this film.
Yeah, I was sort of saving him for you, but of course I give him just as much credit as everyone else. I think again he also had great chemistry, and he embraced that role extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
All right, Scott, talk about this fantastic, amazing dialogue.
Nah, well, sarcastically, it's those. So, like, here's the thing, right? Because of the nature of it, as we've gone over a number of times, it's just there. Like, it's there to move it along. Now, there are some good moments here and there, like throughout, like maybe a handful of them. But for the most part, it just gets you, like, as you might say, Chris, and as we say a lot, from point A to point B. It just gets you along. It's just driving you down the road. It's not Sorkin-esque or anything like that. And granted, it doesn't need to be this. It doesn't call for it to be that. The nature of the story as well. But by that very same issue, that means it's just not all that stand out, not engaging. It might be a softer 0, but I'm going with the 0 unless you have some amazing evidence to convince me or point to convince me otherwise. So.
No. What started the dialogue on a 0 for me is when Nyx walked out of the thing, and she said 2 lines to him, and she finished off with saying, "If you're not sober, don't show up." I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Off your point though, when she's like, "You're just putting the bullets in the revolver and spinning it to see," I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Thank you,
exactly.
Lethal Weapon 1.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there was an awesome scene with Avi and Tyler that was marred by the dialogue.
I agree with that too.
I was so close to being verbatim. If he had said volunteer instead of voluntary, I would have gotten most of that dialogue right. Because I'm sitting here going, I'm like, I wish there was somebody there to witness it. Not even Hugo or Puppy wasn't even there to witness the fact that I'm sitting here like giving each other dialogue. No, I'm going to give it a 0 because it was.
It's stilted at best, I would say, for the most part.
It's just a conglomeration. I mean, it was just like, how many times was I expecting him to say, "Come with me if you want to live"? Yeah. He was doing some variation on that.
I also predicted, like, oh, he's going to say this, or some close variation of it, like here, like, obviously.
So one of the themes of this, what we talk about in this film, is that it's nothing special. It's cliched dialogue, which is sometimes okay, but occasionally it's really bad. And that
possible.
And that jumps off. And as much as I appreciate the threading of Bengali, Hindu, and English throughout this, I imagine that if I spoke Hindu, I would be like, Jesus Christ, I can't believe they said that.
what they're saying is still very flat. I think I agree with that. Yeah.
Even the guy from Stranger Things, who we failed to mention in.
Shit, you forgot about David Harbour, yeah.
No, I didn't. I brought him up a few times.
Who also played a cliche character, but in a fine way.
Yeah,
Even
he's the one who's going to turn him in. Yeah, okay.
He's like, oh, gangster guy's name is a friend of mine. Like, yep. Everyone always says that in that exact scene in that spot. So, yeah.
All right, I'm on to style. As I mentioned, genre-wise, it's a fitting genre film. It hits all the beats it needed to.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think the director is very talented for getting action shots. He's a great choreographer.
And did the Marvel shit.
Yeah.
Bunch of them,
Atomic
anyway.
Bomb, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
And this wasn't a disappointment. I actually think... So action scenes actually something I'm interested in on pacing and blocking for action scenes. Because I've seen films where action scenes are chaotic, sometimes meant to be, but other times it's like, I don't know who's where.
Can't keep track of what's happening.
And I think that they really did a good job of making you know who was where in an action scene. And the distance between people.
And how they all
that.
sort of fit. Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. The thing I was going to I guess I'll talk about the non-action scenes because I thought from the opening shot, like with the fog's coming over the river, like it almost like an Apocalypse Now shot, although I don't think like a 1-to-1 ratio, but just like the sweeping shots of the city. And then when you get into like the claustrophobic, like the markets and stuff like that, all of the shots, I think, whether action or not, I think were really well blocked. They were fucking well lit, in fact, as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was impressed with most of it. I think to me, style is indeed the most standout aspect of this film, and I'm giving it a very strong 1, and I will leave anything else to you, Chris.
The only reason I'm giving it a 1 was because of the third act. The first act I wasn't impressed with.
Really?
It was like, I wasn't really, the first hour of this film, really, I was struggling to pay attention to it.
All right.
But he got my attention with all the character stuff. As cliched as the dialogue was, and as transparent as David Harbour's character was, I really loved it. And the problem I had with the third act was, Ian, to your point, when Saju and Tyler teamed up, everything that happened action-wise from the moment they separated fucking knocked it out of the park. I mean, you've seen action films. I find action films some of the most boring films because it's the way, because it's standard rope. So I'll rarely say this, but the action scene at the end pulled over a soft 0 to a stronger 1.
Okay, nice.
So, I mean, he did a great job. I am a huge fan. I loved Atomic Blonde.
So the bridge seniors,
the whole shootout on the bridge.
From the second he got in the car with Saju, and they're into traffic, and he's like, "Fasten your seatbelt," and he puts the scarf around his head. I was just like, I love this. I absolutely fucking love this. I love this. I love this. And the action scenes were really, really well shot. Nothing really was a surprise to me. But again, it's a difference between an okay burger, a bad burger, and a delicious one. And this one was very good.
I mean, I was impressed with the cinematography throughout, action and otherwise. So,
Chris, would you recommend Extraction 2020?
If the only reason I'm going to recommend it really is because you talked me into the themes and because of when we talked about the style. I wasn't totally impressed with the first hour, as I said, but the performances are outstanding throughout. If you've not seen Patterson, you would not have probably gotten a chance to see the actress who plays Nix, who's wonderful. As we've said before, all the other performances are wonderful. The character moments are wonderful. And the action scene at the end is very exciting, very, very engaging. So it really was kind of, I'm not sure if I'm going to recommend this or not, probably or not. But overall, I'll recommend it. I really will. The third, just stick with it because the second half of the film is definitely going to be extremely, extremely engaging.
Yeah, I mean, I was wavering this one, but I think as we talked it out, I think I would like 2/3 recommend it. So mark it an official 1. Yes, for the fact to see the performances from anyone else who isn't Chris Hemsworth, he's fine. He's fine too. Again, for sure. And for
he's fine.
for what it is. And like, yeah, you want to sit down for 2 hours, like an hour and 58 minutes or whatever, and watch like a pretty decent action movie with good performances from, again, non-known American actors, at least previous to this. Yeah, it is worth it. It's not like must-see shit, but again, for as entertaining as it is, I would recommend it.
I enjoy action films, specifically ones that are slightly better than, and this was
Pretty much is the definition of
this is a great film to watch on like TNT or USA. Halfway through, you're like, oh, I can throw this on and
I see.
have it play in the background. If you're into action movies, this is actually a strong recommend. If you're into film, you're bored, why not? You're in quarantine, you're home. Why not? It's on Netflix.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, as somebody who, again, unless it's something like, Atomic Blonde. I mean, John Wick, the John Wick films surprised the first John Wick film surprised the hell out of me. Because I find action films, kind of boring, but the director really, really knows how to shoot an action film. And even the sewer scene, I know it sounds really stupid, but he shot that very simply, but it was very, very well done.
Yeah, for sure. He knows how to fucking shoot action. Like
with one shot, he established the setting, and it was a tight shot, and he established a lot of the setting, and I thought he did a great job.
I agree.
All right, well, scores now.
What we got there?
2 7s, you and me, Scott, and a 6 for you, Chris. Generally, the mediocrity of the plot and dialogue, antagonists, we've all disagreed with. The only major disagreement was whether Chris Hemsworth was good as a pivot role or not.
Uh-huh.
But overall, that leaves us with a 6.666 repeating, which is right where it is on. So I have no complaints. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer and enjoy celebrating breaking off from the English Empire. Here with Scott Thurla.
See you in the next black market drug deal.
And Christopher Morgan.
Run to the hills.
Cheers.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manzer. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?